Simone Davis stood on her own front porch at 11:47 p.m., her nursing scrubs still damp with sweat from a double shift at the hospital, and the house key that had opened this door for 3 years suddenly felt foreign in her trembling fingers. Through the living room window, she could see the warm glow of the television and her husband Darnell lounging on their brown leather couch, his feet propped up, laughing at something on the screen. She knocked. Once. Twice. 3 times, each rap growing more urgent against the wooden door she had painted sky blue just last summer when everything still felt right in her world. No answer. The December wind cut through her thin scrubs like ice water, and that's when she heard it, a soft whimpering coming from around the side of the house. Her heart stopped. She knew that sound. It was the same cry her 8-year-old daughter Essence made when she had nightmares about the dark. Simone ran around the corner of their small brick house in Detroit, her worn sneakers slipping on the frost-covered grass. What she found there would replay in her mind for years to come, a scene so cruel it seemed impossible that it was happening in her own backyard. Huddled against the back door, wrapped in nothing but a thin pink nightgown and a house robe that barely covered her small frame, was Essence. Her beautiful brown skin had taken on an ashy gray color, her lips were purple with cold, and her usually bouncing curls were matted against her head with tears that had frozen on her cheeks. But she wasn't alone. Sitting beside her on the concrete steps, holding her granddaughter close, was Grandma Ruby. At 72 years old, Simone's mother had raised 5 children through the hardest times Detroit had ever seen, but now she looked smaller than Simone had ever witnessed. Her silver hair was uncovered, her brown housecoat soaked through from the snow, and her hands, those same hands that had braided Simone's hair every Sunday morning and taught her how to make cornbread from scratch, were shaking uncontrollably as she tried to keep Essence warm. "Mama?" Simone's voice cracked as she dropped to her knees on the frozen ground. "Baby girl? What are you doing out here?" Essence looked up with eyes that held too much pain for someone who still believed in Santa Claus. "Mommy, we've been out here since dinner time. We knocked and knocked, but nobody would let us in. Daddy's family said we had to wait outside until you came home." The words hit Simone like a physical blow. She pulled both her daughter and mother into her arms, feeling how cold their bodies were, how they shook against her. Essence's small frame felt like it weighed nothing, and Grandma Ruby's breathing was shallow and labored. "How long?" Simone whispered. 5 hours, Grandma Ruby managed through chattering teeth. "Essence had to use the bathroom so bad, baby. I told her to go behind the shed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Simone's vision blurred, but not from tears, from rage so pure it made her hands shake. She had left for work at noon, kissing Essence goodbye and telling her to be good for Grandma Ruby, who had come to stay with them while Darnell looked for work. She had worked a double shift to cover the extra Christmas expenses, believing her family was safe and warm inside their home. Instead, her husband's family had locked out a 72-year-old woman and an 8-year-old child in 30-degree weather for 5 hours. "We tried calling you," Essence whispered, her voice so hoarse from crying. "But Aunt Destiny took our phones. She said you needed to learn that this wasn't our house anymore." Simone felt something break inside her chest, not her heart, because that was still pumping with fury, but something deeper. The trust she had built. The belief that the man she married would protect what mattered most to her. The faith that family meant something. She stood up, lifting Essence in her arms while helping Grandma Ruby to her feet. "We're going inside right now." "The door's locked, Mommy?" "Not for long." Simone carried Essence to the back door and pounded on it with the side of her fist. "Darnell, open this door right now." Silence. She walked around to the front, her mother moving slowly behind her, and pounded on the front door. Through the window, she could see movement in the kitchen. Patricia, Darnell's mother, walked past the window and made eye contact with Simone. The older woman looked at her for a long moment, then deliberately closed the curtains. That's when Simone knew this wasn't about forgetfulness or misunderstanding. This was intentional. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? "My 8-year-old daughter and elderly mother have been locked out of our house in freezing weather for 5 hours by my husband's family. My daughter might have hypothermia." Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the quiet neighborhood. Red and blue lights reflected off the ice-covered cars parked along their street, and neighbors began peering out of windows. Mrs. Henderson from next door came outside in her bathrobe, took one look at Essence and Grandma Ruby, and immediately ushered them into her warm house. Officer Jackson, a tall black man in his 40s, took Simone's statement while paramedics checked Essence and Grandma Ruby. The front door of her house remained locked. "Ma'am, we can see people moving around inside," Officer Jackson said. "But they're not responding to our knocks." Break it down, Simone said quietly. We need to try other approaches first. But Simone wasn't listening anymore. She was watching through Mrs. Henderson's front window as a paramedic wrapped her shivering daughter in heated blankets, and something fundamental shifted inside her. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about every night from now on. This was about choosing what kind of mother she was going to be and what kind of life her daughter deserved. The front door of her house finally opened and Darnell stepped out, his hands raised like he was the victim. Behind him stood his mother Patricia, his father Jerome, and his sister Destiny, all of them looking annoyed rather than ashamed. What's all this noise about? Darnell called out as if he didn't know exactly why police cars were parked in front of his house. Simone walked across the street slowly, her nursing training keeping her calm even though her heart was racing. When she reached her husband, she looked into his eyes, the same eyes she had fallen in love with 4 years ago, and saw a stranger. Where were they supposed to sleep tonight? She asked quietly. They could have gone to a hotel. With what money? I gave you my whole paycheck on Friday. That's not my problem. Officer Jackson stepped forward. Sir, we have a report that you locked a child and elderly woman outside in below freezing temperatures for over 5 hours. That's endangering the welfare of a child and elderly abuse. This is my house, Darnell said. I can decide who stays and who goes. Actually, Officer Jackson said, according to the lease your wife provided, both your names are on it. And child abandonment is a crime regardless of whose house it is. That's when Patricia stepped forward, her voice sharp with an accent that made every word sound like an accusation. That little girl needs to learn respect. She was talking back to me and that old woman was defending her. In my day, children knew their place. In your day, Simone said, her voice steady and clear, children also died from exposure because adults were too proud to show basic human decency. The argument that followed would be talked about in the neighborhood for months. Voices raised, accusations thrown, police trying to keep the peace while paramedics continued treating Essence and Grandma Ruby. But through it all, one thing became crystal clear to everyone watching. This marriage was over. By 2 a.m., Darnell was in custody for child endangerment. His family had been escorted off the property. Aunt Simone sat in Mrs. Henderson's living room, holding her sleeping daughter while her mother sipped hot tea with shaking hands. What happens now, baby? Grandma Ruby asked. Simone looked down at Essence's face, peaceful in sleep for the first time in hours, and made a decision that would change everything. Now we start over. The next morning brought a knock on Mrs. Henderson's door that Simone had been dreading. Through the window, she could see Patricia and Jerome Thompson standing on the porch, their faces set with the kind of determination that had nothing to do with apology and everything to do with control. I'll handle this, Mrs. Henderson said, but Simone was already standing. No, ma'am. This is something I need to do. Essence was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in 3 blankets, and Grandma Ruby was in the kitchen making breakfast with ingredients Mrs. Henderson had insisted on providing. The smell of bacon and eggs filled the small house, making everything feel normal except for the fact that they were refugees in their neighbor's home. Simone opened the door but didn't invite them in. We need to talk, Patricia said without preamble. About what? About Darnell. About this mess you've created. The words were so backwards, so completely wrong that Simone actually laughed. The mess I created? By coming home from work. By calling the police on your own husband, Jerome spoke up, his voice carrying the weight of a man who expected to be listened to. By airing our family business in the street. Your son locked my daughter outside in freezing weather. What exactly did you think I was going to do? Handle it like a wife should, Patricia snapped. Inside the family. Not by getting the law involved and making Darnell look like some kind of criminal. Simone felt that familiar anger rising again, but underneath it was something new, a clarity she hadn't felt in years. He is a criminal. What he did to Essence is illegal. What he did to my mother is illegal. Your mother, Patricia said the words like they tasted bad, has been filling that child's head with nonsense about being too good for discipline. And you've been working so much, you don't even know what goes on in your own house. That hit something deep. Simone had been working extra shifts for months, trying to keep up with bills that seemed to multiply every month. Darnell had been out of work since August, claiming he was looking for something worthy of his skills, which apparently meant nothing was good enough for a man with a high school diploma and no trade training. What goes on in my house, Simone said carefully, is that I work 2 jobs to pay rent while your son sits on the couch and his family moves in to eat our food and run our utilities up. Darnell is going through a hard time. We're all going through a hard time. But I don't lock children outside when I'm frustrated. Mrs. Henderson appeared behind Simone, all 5 feet of her radiating the kind of protective energy that grandmothers and church mothers carried. Is there a problem here? No, ma'am, Simone said. They were just leaving. But Patricia wasn't done. You think you're better than us because you have that little nursing job. But let me tell you something, Darnell can do better than you. A lot better. And if you don't drop these charges and get him out of jail, you're going to find out just how much better. The threat hung in the air like smoke, and Simone felt something she hadn't experienced in their 3 years of marriage. Relief. Relief that the mask had finally come off. Relief that she could stop pretending this was a family worth fighting for. You're right, she said quietly. He probably can do better than me. But I can definitely do better than him. After they left, Simone sat at Mrs. Henderson's kitchen table while Grandma Ruby and their host worked around her, preparing food and making phone calls to family members who needed to know what had happened. Essence had woken up and was coloring in a book Mrs. Henderson had found, her movements still sluggish from the night before. Mommy, Essence said without looking up from her crayons, are we going back to that house? The question was simple, but the weight of it pressed down on Simone's shoulders like a load she'd been carrying for too long. Going back meant dealing with Darnell's family. It meant pretending last night hadn't happened. It meant teaching Essence that this was acceptable behavior from people who were supposed to love you. But not going back meant starting over with nothing but her nursing salary and whatever help family could provide. It meant finding a new place to live in a city where decent, affordable housing was hard to come by. It meant being a single mother in a world that wasn't always kind to single mothers. I don't know yet, baby girl. Good, Essence said, still coloring. I don't want to go back there. Grandma Ruby sat down across from them, her movements still careful after the night before. Baby, I need to tell you something. Simone looked up from her coffee. This wasn't the first time. The words settled like stones in Simone's stomach. What do you mean? Last week, when you were at work, Patricia told Essence she was eating too much at dinner. Made that baby sit at the table and watch while everyone else ate dessert. Essence's crayon stopped moving. 2 weeks before that, Jerome told Essence her hair looked nappy and needed to be fixed proper before she could come out of her room. Simone's hands tightened around her coffee mug. And baby, Grandma Ruby's voice got softer, they've been telling that child that you don't love her enough to stay home with her. That you care more about work than your own daughter. The mug shattered in Simone's hands, coffee and ceramic pieces scattering across Mrs. Henderson's clean table. But she barely noticed because something was breaking inside her too, the last piece of doubt about what she needed to do. Essence looked up, her brown eyes wide. Mommy, you're bleeding. Simone looked down at her hands, saw the small cuts from the broken mug and started to laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because sometimes when everything breaks at once, laughter is the only response that makes sense. Mrs. Henderson, she said, could I use your phone? I need to call a lawyer. That afternoon, while Essence napped and Grandma Ruby watched her stories on television, Simone walked back to her house. Not to go inside, but to stand in the yard and really look at it. The small brick house with the blue door she had painted. The flower beds she had planned for spring. The swing set in the backyard where Essence played. All of it had been home a day ago. Now it just looked like a place where bad things had happened. Her phone rang. It was her sister Denise calling from Atlanta. Mama told me what happened. Are you okay? No, Simone said honestly. But I will be. You want me to come up there? No. I need to handle this myself. What are you going to do? Simone looked at the house one more time, then turned away. I'm going to protect my daughter. Whatever that takes. That evening she made 2 phone calls that would change everything. The first was to a domestic violence attorney who specialized in cases involving child welfare. The second was to her supervisor at the hospital, asking about transfer opportunities to other cities. By the time she tucked Essence into Mrs. Henderson's guest bed that night, the wheels were already in motion for a completely different life. Mommy, Essence whispered in the dark, I'm sorry I was bad. Simone's heart broke all over again. Baby girl, you weren't bad. You were never bad. What happened to you was wrong and it was never your fault. But Aunt Patricia said. Aunt Patricia was wrong. And you don't have to worry about what she says anymore. Promise. Simone looked down at her daughter's face in the dim light from the hallway and made the most important promise of her life. I promise, baby girl. Nobody is ever going to treat you like that again. That night, she lay awake planning their escape from a life that had slowly been poisoning them both. By morning, she would know exactly what she needed to do. 3 days later, Simone was folding Essence's clothes in Mrs. Henderson's guest room when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. Too many reporters and nosy relatives had been calling since word spread about Darnell's arrest. Hello? Is this Simone Davis? Yes. Mrs. Davis, this is Dr. Martinez from Detroit General Hospital. I'm calling about your application for our traveling nurse program. Simone sat down hard on the bed, her heart racing. She had filled out the application on impulse 2 days ago, during her lunch break, thinking it was probably pointless but needing to feel like she was doing something to move forward. Yes, sir. I have to tell you, your timing is remarkable. We just got an urgent request from our partner hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina. They need an experienced nurse to start immediately, and your credentials are exactly what they're looking for. Charlotte. Simone had never been to Charlotte, barely knew anything about North Carolina except that it was far away from Detroit and the Thompson family. What would this involve? Full relocation assistance, housing allowance, and a 20% pay increase. The position is in pediatric care, which I see is your specialty. They need someone who can start within 2 weeks. Simone looked around Mrs. Henderson's guest room at the borrowed space where she and her daughter were living like refugees, and felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Dr. Martinez, can I call you back in an hour? Of course. But Mrs. Davis? Opportunities like this don't come along often, especially with a full relocation package. After she hung up, Simone sat staring at her phone for 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Then she walked downstairs where Grandma Ruby and Mrs. Henderson were teaching Essence how to make sweet potato pie. Mama, can I talk to you for a minute? They stepped into the living room while Essence continued measuring ingredients, her tongue poking out in concentration. A hospital in Charlotte wants me to come work for them. They'll pay for us to move and everything. Grandma Ruby was quiet for a long moment. How do you feel about that? Scared. Excited. Like maybe this is what we're supposed to do. What about Darnell? That was the question Simone had been avoiding. Darnell was still in jail, but his family was working to get bail money together. Once he got out, there would be court dates and custody issues and all the messy legal complications of ending a marriage. I talked to the lawyer yesterday. She said if I move before the formal divorce proceedings start, and if I can prove the move is for work, it doesn't count as kidnapping or anything like that. And Essence. She's been asking me every day if we have to go back to that house. Maybe this is the answer. That evening, Simone sat Essence down for the most important conversation of both their lives. Baby girl, how would you feel about moving to a new city? Somewhere warm where it doesn't get so cold in winter? Essence looked up from her coloring book. Would Daddy's family be there? No. Would Daddy be there? No. It would just be me and you and Grandma Ruby. Essence put down her crayon and climbed into Simone's lap. Would I get to go to a new school? Yes. And make new friends? Yes. And we wouldn't have to be scared anymore? That question nearly broke Simone's heart because she hadn't realized Essence knew to be scared. No, baby. We wouldn't have to be scared anymore. Essence was quiet for a minute, then looked up at her mother with eyes that seemed older than 8 years old. Can we go tomorrow? Simone called Dr. Martinez back that night and accepted the position. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, packing, and difficult conversations. Darnell's family called constantly, threatening legal action and making accusations about parental kidnapping. Darnell himself called from jail, alternating between apologies and anger, promising to change while also blaming Simone for ruining his life. The hardest part was explaining to Essence why Daddy wouldn't be coming with them. Does Daddy not love me anymore? She asked one night while they were packing her toys. Simone stopped folding clothes and sat on the floor next to her daughter. Daddy loves you in his way, baby girl. But sometimes adults make choices that hurt people they love, and when that happens, other adults have to make choices to protect the people who can't protect themselves. Like you're protecting me? Like I'm protecting you. Essence nodded like this made perfect sense to her, and Simone wondered how her 8-year-old daughter had developed such wisdom about family dysfunction. The night before they left Detroit, Mrs. Henderson threw them a going-away dinner. She invited some of the church ladies and a few neighbors, and for a few hours, Simone's house felt full of the kind of love and support she'd forgotten existed. You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Henderson told her while they were cleaning up. That little girl deserves better than what she was getting. What if I can't make it work? What if Charlotte doesn't work out? Then you'll try somewhere else. But baby, you're stronger than you know. You've been carrying everyone else for so long, you forgot how to let yourself be carried. That night, Simone packed the last of their belongings while Essence slept. 3 suitcases and 2 boxes, that's what their life in Detroit had come down to. Everything else would stay behind. The furniture, the dishes, the wedding photos, the life she had thought she was building. At 5 a.m., she loaded their things into the rental car that would take them to their new life. Grandma Ruby settled into the passenger seat with her purse and a thermos of coffee. Essence climbed into the back with her favorite stuffed animal and the coloring books Mrs. Henderson had bought for the trip. As they drove away from the house with the blue door, Essence pressed her face to the window. "Bye, house," she said softly. Simone looked in the rearview mirror one last time at the neighborhood where she thought she would raise her daughter, then focused on the road ahead. "Bye, house," she whispered back. 8 hours later, they were in Charlotte, North Carolina, looking at their new apartment complex with a swimming pool and a playground where children were laughing in the December sunshine. The temperature was 55 degrees, warm enough for Essence to run around the playground in just a light jacket. "Mommy, look how high I can swing," she called out, pumping her legs and flying higher than Simone had seen her go in months. "I see you, baby girl." That night, in their empty apartment with just air mattresses and takeout Chinese food, Simone tucked Essence into her sleeping bag and listened to her daughter's prayers. "Thank you, God, for our new house and for making it warm and for the playground. And please help Daddy learn how to be nice. And thank you for my mommy who keeps me safe." After Essence fell asleep, Simone sat by the window looking out at the city lights and feeling something she had almost forgotten: peace. They had made it. They were safe. And tomorrow they would start building something new. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Darnell's number. "You can't keep my daughter away from me forever." Simone looked at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations belonged to the past, and this was her time for moving forward. 6 months later, Simone was rushing through the hospital corridors of Charlotte General, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floors as she tried to get to her patient's room before the shift change meeting. Working in pediatric care was everything she had hoped for: challenging, rewarding, and full of the kind of hope that comes with helping children heal. "Simone," called out Janet, one of the other nurses. "Mrs. Patterson in room 314 has been asking for you specifically." Simone smiled as she grabbed Mrs. Patterson's chart. 7-year-old Jamie Patterson had been in and out of the hospital for months dealing with complications from diabetes, and somehow Simone had become her favorite nurse. Maybe it was because Essence was close to the same age, or maybe it was because Simone understood what it felt like to be small and need someone to advocate for you. "Hey there, sunshine," Simone said as she entered the room. "How are we feeling today?" Jamie lit up from her hospital bed. "Miss Simone." "Mama, this is the nurse I told you about." Mrs. Patterson, a tired-looking woman in her 30s, stood up from the bedside chair and extended her hand. "Thank you so much for taking such good care of my baby. She talks about you all the time at home." "It's my pleasure. Jamie's one of our favorites around here." As Simone checked Jamie's vitals and adjusted her medication, the little girl chattered about everything from her favorite TV shows to the book report she was working on for school. It reminded Simone of Essence, who had blossomed in Charlotte in ways that sometimes took her breath away. Their new life had fallen into place more smoothly than Simone had dared to hope. Essence loved her new school, where teachers praised her intelligence and creativity instead of trying to discipline her spirit. She had made friends with children from all different backgrounds, and her laughter filled their apartment every evening when she came home with stories about her day. Grandma Ruby had found a new church family at Mount Olive Baptist, where Reverend Brown appreciated her wisdom and experience and had asked her to help with the children's ministry. She spent her days cooking for church functions, mentoring young mothers, and spoiling Essence in all the ways grandmothers were supposed to. After her shift, Simone drove to Essence's after-school program to pick her up. Pine Ridge Elementary had a wonderful extended day program that kept children until 6 p.m., which allowed Simone to work full-time without worrying about childcare. "Mommy?" Essence ran across the playground when she saw Simone's car. "Guess what happened today?" "What happened, baby girl?" "Mrs. Williams wants me to be in the school play. I get to be a butterfly and I have a whole song to sing by myself." Simone's heart swelled with pride. 6 months ago, Essence had been a quiet, anxious child who flinched when adults raised their voices. Now she was confident enough to sing solo in front of an audience. "That's wonderful. We'll have to call Grandma Ruby and tell her. Can we stop and get her some of those dinner rolls she likes? From the bakery?" "Of course we can." As they drove through Charlotte's tree-lined streets toward their apartment complex, Simone reflected on how different this life was from the one they'd left behind. Here, Essence's joy was celebrated instead of criticized. Here, Simone came home from work to peace instead of drama. Here, they were building something that belonged to them. Their apartment had slowly filled with furniture from thrift stores and gifts from new friends at work and church. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. Essence had her own room painted lavender, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and posters of her favorite singers on the walls. Grandma Ruby had a comfortable chair by the window where she sat to read her devotions each morning. But the best part of their new life was something harder to measure: the absence of fear. Simone no longer held her breath when she walked through the front door, wondering what drama would greet her. Essence no longer asked if she was in trouble when adults wanted to talk to her. Grandma Ruby no longer looked over her shoulder, waiting for someone to criticize her presence. That evening, after dinner and homework and bedtime stories, Simone sat at her kitchen table paying bills. The math was still tight, it always was for single mothers, but she was managing. The extra money from the job transfer had helped them get established, and now her regular salary was enough to cover their expenses with a little left over for emergencies. Her phone rang. It was her sister Denise calling from Atlanta. "Hey big sister. How's life in the South treating you?" "Better than I ever imagined. Essence is in the school play. Look at my niece being a star. And how are you doing?" "Really?" Simone considered the question. 6 months ago, she would have given an automatic fine response. Now she took time to think about it. "I'm happy," she said, and realized she meant it. "For the first time in years, I'm actually happy. What about the legal stuff? Any word from Darnell?" The divorce papers had been finalized 3 months ago. Darnell had fought for custody rights, but his arrest record and the testimony from Mrs. Henderson and other neighbors about what had happened that night had limited his options. He was granted supervised visitation rights, but only if he completed anger management classes and maintained steady employment for 6 months. So far, he hadn't done either. His lawyer calls sometimes, but there's nothing new. He'd have to come to Charlotte for visits anyway, and he doesn't seem interested in making that effort. Good riddance. Denise. I'm serious. Essence is better off without him, and you know it. That was probably true, but Simone still felt sad about it sometimes. Not sad about leaving Darnell, but sad that Essence's father had chosen his pride and his family's approval over his daughter's well-being. After they hung up, Simone walked through her quiet apartment, checking on her family. Grandma Ruby was asleep in her recliner with her Bible open in her lap. Essence was curled up in her lavender room, clutching the stuffed elephant Mrs. Henderson had given her as a going-away present. Standing in her daughter's doorway, watching her sleep peacefully, Simone felt a rush of gratitude so strong it brought tears to her eyes. This little girl who had been locked outside in the cold was now safe and warm and preparing to sing on stage in front of her whole school. This little girl was going to grow up knowing she deserved to be protected and cherished and heard. Sometimes the best victories weren't dramatic. Sometimes they were as quiet as a child sleeping without nightmares in a room painted her favorite color. The next morning brought unexpected news. Dr. Martinez called while Simone was getting ready for work. "I have an interesting opportunity for you," he said. "The hospital is starting a new program for at-risk children, kids who come through the emergency room with suspected abuse or neglect cases. They need someone to coordinate care and advocate for these children through the system. The position comes with a significant pay raise and would allow you to really make a difference." Simone sat down on her bed, processing what he was saying. A chance to help children like Essence had been children who needed someone to fight for them when the adults in their lives failed them. "Dr. Martinez, I'm very interested. I thought you might be. With your background and your experience, you'd be perfect for it. Can you come in this afternoon to discuss the details?" After she hung up, Simone looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and saw something she hadn't seen in years. A woman who was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. This was what starting over looked like. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just protecting Essence, but building a life where protection wasn't necessary because love was abundant. 1 year later, Simone stood backstage at Pine Ridge Elementary, watching through the curtains as parents filed into the school auditorium for the spring musical. Essence was beside her in her butterfly costume, complete with orange and black wings that sparkled under the stage lights. "Are you nervous, baby girl?" "A little bit. But mostly excited." That summed up how Simone felt about most things these days, a little nervous but mostly excited. Life in Charlotte had exceeded every hope she'd had when they first drove away from Detroit. Her new position as child advocacy coordinator at the hospital was everything Dr. Martinez had promised and more. She spent her days working with social workers, lawyers, and families to ensure that children who came through their emergency room got the help they needed. It was heartbreaking work sometimes, but also deeply rewarding. Last month, she had helped place twin 5-year-old boys with their grandmother after their mother's boyfriend had been arrested for abuse. Watching those little boys laugh and play in a safe environment reminded her why she'd chosen this path. 5 minutes until curtain, called the drama teacher. Essence hugged Simone quickly, then took her place with the other children. Simone made her way to the audience, where Grandma Ruby had saved her a seat in the front row. "Look at all these people here for our baby," Grandma Ruby whispered, gesturing at the packed auditorium. It was true. Mrs. Henderson had driven down from Detroit specifically for the show. Janet and several other nurses from the hospital had come to support them. Reverend Brown and his wife were there, along with half the congregation from Mount Olive Baptist. Even Jamie Patterson and her mother had come, Jamie finally healthy enough to attend her first school event in months. The lights dimmed, and the curtain rose on a garden scene where children dressed as various insects and flowers began their performance. When Essence stepped forward for her solo, Simone held her breath. Then her daughter's clear, strong voice filled the auditorium, singing about transformation and growing wings and learning to fly. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone who knew their story, and Simone felt tears streaming down her face as she watched her little girl shine on stage. After the show, they were surrounded by well-wishers and friends. Essence glowed as people congratulated her on her performance, and Simone marveled at how confident and happy her daughter had become. "Miss Simone." Jamie Patterson appeared at her elbow, tugging on her scrubs. "Essence was so good. Can she come to my birthday party next weekend?" "We'll have to ask her mama," Simone said, smiling at Mrs. Patterson. "But I think she'd love to." As the crowd began to thin out, Mrs. Henderson approached them with something in her hands. "I brought you something," she said, handing Simone an envelope. "It came to the house about a week after you left. I thought you should have it." Simone looked at the return address and felt her stomach drop. It was from Darnell, postmarked just days after they'd moved to Charlotte. "You don't have to read it now," Mrs. Henderson said gently. "Or ever if you don't want to." But Simone found herself opening it right there in the school hallway while Essence was saying goodbye to her classmates. The letter was short. Simone, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to say this. I was wrong. What I let my family do to Essence and your mama was wrong, and I'm sorry. I keep thinking about that night and how scared she must have been, and it makes me sick. I've been going to counseling like the court ordered, and I'm starting to understand some things about myself that I didn't want to see before. I let my family treat you all bad because I was scared of standing up to them. I was scared of a lot of things. I don't expect you to forgive me or come back. You're probably better off without me. But I want you to know that Essence deserves better than what I gave her, and I'm glad she has a mama strong enough to make sure she gets it. Tell her I love her and I'm sorry. Darnell Astor. Simone read the letter twice, then folded it and put it in her purse. It was the apology she'd never expected to receive, and while it didn't change anything, it did provide a kind of closure she hadn't known she needed. "Everything okay?" Grandma Ruby asked, noticing her expression. "Everything's perfect," Simone said, and meant it. 3 hours later, they were home in their apartment, Essence finally asleep after talking nonstop about the performance and her upcoming birthday party invitation. Grandma Ruby was in her chair with her evening cup of tea, and Simone was cleaning up the kitchen when her phone rang. It was Dr. Martinez calling unusually late. "Simone, I'm sorry to bother you at home, but I have some news that couldn't wait until tomorrow." "What's happening?" "The hospital board was so impressed with your work in the child advocacy program that they want to expand it. They're offering you a position as Director of Family Services for the entire hospital system. It would mean overseeing programs at all 3 of our locations." Simone sat down hard at her kitchen table. "Dr. Martinez, I don't know what to say. It's a significant promotion with a salary increase to match. You'd be helping set policy for how we handle vulnerable families throughout the region." After she hung up, Simone sat in her quiet kitchen thinking about the journey that had brought them here. 18 months ago, she'd been a woman trapped in a marriage that was slowly crushing her spirit, working extra shifts just to survive, watching her daughter lose her spark a little more each day. Now she was being offered a leadership position that would allow her to protect children on a much larger scale. Essence was thriving academically and socially. Grandma Ruby had found new purpose and community. They had built a life filled with love, respect, and possibility. "Baby?" Grandma Ruby appeared in the kitchen doorway. "You look like you've seen a ghost." They want to promote me to director of the whole family services department. Grandma Ruby smiled and sat down across from her. Of course they do. You've been protecting families your whole life. Now you just get to do it officially. What if I'm not ready? You were ready the night you picked up that phone and called the police to protect your daughter. Everything since then has just been practice. The next morning, Simone woke up early and made coffee while the house was still quiet. She sat by the living room window, watching the sunrise paint Charlotte's skyline in shades of gold and pink, and thought about all the mornings she dreaded in her old life. Those days seemed like they belonged to someone else now, a woman who had been smaller than her problems, who had accepted less than she deserved, who had been afraid to want more. Essence padded into the living room in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Morning, Mommy. Morning, baby girl. You were amazing last night. Essence climbed into Simone's lap, fitting perfectly even though she was getting so tall. Mommy, are we ever going to move again? Do you want to move? No. I like it here. I like my school and my friends and my room and everything. Then we're staying right here. Promise? Simone looked around their apartment at the photos on the walls showing a year of birthday parties and school events and church picnics. At Grandma Ruby's reading chair and Essence's art projects on the refrigerator and the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. I promise, baby girl. This is home. Later that day, Simone called Dr. Martinez, her sister Denise, and Reverend Brown. That evening, she took Darnell's letter out of her purse and read it one more time. Then she wrote a short response. Asterisk Darnell, thank you for your letter. Essence is doing wonderful. She's in school plays now and has lots of friends and is growing up to be an amazing little girl. I forgive you not for your sake but for mine and hers. We're moving forward with love instead of anger. I hope you find peace. Simone Asterisk. She mailed it the next day, then put that chapter of their lives firmly in the past where it belonged. 6 months later, Simone stood in front of the hospital board, presenting her first quarterly report as Director of Family Services. The numbers told a story of success. More children safely placed with relatives, more families connected with resources, more advocacy and support for the most vulnerable patients in their system. But the real success was smaller and more personal. It was Essence making the honor roll. It was Grandma Ruby teaching Sunday school. It was the three of them sitting around their dinner table each night, sharing stories about their days and planning for their tomorrows. It was the knowledge that sometimes the best thing you can do for the people you love is to be brave enough to start over. That night, as Simone tucked Essence into bed, her daughter asked the question that had become part of their bedtime routine. Tell me the story about the night we left Detroit. Again? I've told you that story 100 times. I like it. It's like a fairy tale where the princess saves herself. So Simone told the story again about a mama who worked late and came home to find her baby locked outside in the cold, and how that mama decided that nobody would ever treat her baby that way again. She told about the long drive to a new city and the empty apartment that became a home and all the good things that grew from one night when everything seemed terrible. And they lived happily ever after? Essence asked, even though she knew the ending. They lived happily ever after, Simone confirmed. Because sometimes fairy tales are true. Sometimes the princess does save herself.